Good morning and welcome to another session of GM Tips. GM Rick here. Sorry for the background. The background's keeping Mini GM happy. She is watching Ice Age, Age of the Dinosaurs. So, yeah, we love the scrap and we love the laughter. So I hope you guys enjoy the session this morning. This morning I'm going to talk a little bit about taking a adventure path and modifying it to what I call more of a homebrew or a modified existing. Now, a lot of people, they don't always subscribe to this, and I understand that. And look, I know from looking at the ratings out on most sites, most people like a homebrew where they make their own. And I understand that totally. When I was starting out, I was kind of a mix. I had a little bit of the Greyhawk area. I also had Forgotten Realms, but I had my own too, which I called Calistria. And Calistria was my realm, and I loved Calistria. It was kind of its own little take of a little bit of everything. I brought all these different workings that I liked from the other systems and other ideas, plus my own ideas, and brought them together in my own world. And it took a lot of work. Let me tell you, I had this thick. I wish I still had it. It's back at my parents' house, which unfortunately they passed on and my sister's taken over. So I don't know if I'll ever see it, but we'll see. So, what do I do now? Well, for sake of time, because I'm a fiance, I've got 3 kids, I've got a job that consumes a lot of time, and I've got other things outside of the game, I have to be a little bit more thought-provoked with my time, and I can't spend 20, 30 hours a week working on Pathfinder. It just does not work. In fact, my fiance made a comment for Father's Day, gee, only 2 of your items are not RPG related. And I went, crap. I need to do some other things. So I'm seeing how it does affect my life, and I want to be sensitive to those who are in my life and not make them feel like everything in my life is RPG, because it's not. It is a good section of it, don't get me wrong. It is my hobby, and it is the thing I like and enjoy most. But I love being dad and other things. So that's why I went the route that I've been going. And my next adventure will be in a wonderfully fun place for my characters. Right now they're doing a modified Reign of Winter. Next comes Osirian Legacy of the Pharaohs. I'm going to take them from ice friggin' cold to old blast furnace heat warm. So they're going to go to the area of Osirian, and they haven't adventured much on Garen. They've done a little bit. This particular group, one of my players has had an experience with Garen in the past, which is the southern continent of the Inner Sea campaign. And so I won't go into a lot of detail. There are 7 continents in the Inner Sea, Pathfinder's the Inner Sea. Fortunately, only 2 of them have been fleshed out so far. Some of the way, or actually I should say 1.5, because real South Garen has not been done yet. So there's so much to do with this campaign, and again, it starts into this, which is the Mummy's Mask. And if you guys haven't gotten the audiobooks on it and listened to it as GMs, whether you're D&D, whether you're Savage Worlds, whether you're Pathfinder, whether you're Cypher system, whether you're Fate system, or whatever system you want to choose, Dungeon World, 13th Age, whatever one you want to choose and work with. Mummy's Mask is a really well done Egyptian-based campaign. And Osirian on the Inner Sea is their Egypt. It's got an interesting beginning. I love the history behind it. So what I'm doing is I'm taking these modules, okay? The one thing about adventure paths, even though they've got that many books, and there's one missing that I've got up on my shelf, so you've got a plethora of books, okay, that'll cover the path. The neat part about it is they leave so much unfleshed along the way. And that's the thing I really take the time to dig into, because my players are not going to stay on the straight and narrow. I can tell you that right now. I just know them. I've known them now going on 3 years worth of play. And I can, well, actually, No, 5, because we did Carrying Crown. So we've done the Carrying Crown, we've done Reign of Winter, now we're doing this. So I'm going to take you a little bit of what I do in order to make it much more amenable and my own. And that's the neat thing about what Paizo will tell you. You can take anything they make and make it your own, and modify it in any way you see fit to fit what you're trying to do. Some people run them straight through, and they're fun, run straight through. Don't get me wrong. You could run this cover to cover, straight through, and it would be just as much fun as if you modified it. I'm going to tell you that from reading. However, I modify it for 3 reasons. Number 1, my players, knowing them, will read one of those books, and will try to get the gist of what they need to do to win. I'm sorry, it's too tempting not to. So they're going to do that, and that's why I modify it to make it more interesting for them. Number 2, I do it because I like to add my own twists, NPCs, kicks, societies, secret machinations, and other things going on. Especially if I've got my players' backgrounds, and I do in this case. My players have given me their backgrounds ahead of time, all but one. And it's really pretty interesting, so I'm really working around this for it. Now, 3, I've got my idea of the richness of this culture, so I really and truly want to put some memorable historical flares. Plus, I also know what's happened in Carrying Crown and Reign of Winter, which will affect this. Even though it's a different set of characters, a different thing, it will affect this timeline in many ways. So how they play this thing down will affect how this all comes out. So I factor all those things into it. Now, let's take a look at Osirian. So, I'm going to put this map up for you guys to see. Hopefully you guys get to see it. If you guys haven't, then do me a favor, go online and look up Osirian. Because I'm going to explain to you kind of what I do, and you can use some of these ideas if you run it, or you can do it different. The one thing I do is I look at which cities they have fleshed out. And there are several cities they have fleshed out. The 3-city area is that they start this adventure in is Wadi, An, and Tefu. So Wadi is real well fleshed out. Now again, even though they flesh it out, they leave holes in the city for you to put in your own take. They just give you their take of what they see as interesting in the city for your players. They do the same with Tefu, Ipek. Well, actually, no, not Ipek. They do Tefu, An, and that's it. And then they go off into the desert. So you don't get a lot of other places to go. So really your 2 cities they focus on are Tefu and Wadi. So An is left alone. Ipek is left alone. Safani is left alone. Otet is left alone. And Dejenik is left out. So, what do I think? My characters are going to get a map of the region. Just going to tell you that right now. They're going to find a way to get a map. And they're going to want to go to these cities that no one else has gone to. That they don't. I have zero information on. Because why? Because in some cases they're going to be closer than the home base ones. And because they're going to want to find out if there's anything interesting at these places. So what do I do? Well, yesterday I spent some time while I was watching Mini GM and having fun and watching movies with her and laughing and giggling and running around. And I fleshed out these cities. Why would I do that? Well, because I know my players. So what do? I get the settlement sheets. If you guys haven't gotten these for your other systems, they're good for D&D. They're good for any D20-based system. The settlement sheets we've talked about before. I've kind of mentioned them in another GM Tips. They have the name of the settlement, what its aliases are, the overall alignment. Why does that play in? Because it affects your roles and modifiers when you're doing things in the city with skills. Okay? What campaign role is it? So is it a major stopping point? You know, you do yourself a little reminder and write this up. What type is it? Is it a thorp? Is it a village? Is it a small city? That's dependent on population size. Now, fortunately, in this, they give you a little bit of fleshing out of some of these cities and maps, which is really cool, but they left a lot to the imagination. So just keep that in mind. So I went and did Safani. So let's take a look at Safani as a for instance. What did I do? Well, as you can see, I put the name, the alias, the hidden village. What alignment is it? What size is it? Modifier. And those are all given to you in the Pathfinder GM's Guide or PFSRD, which you could use that for D&D or for whatever system. Just look at that section on settlements, and it will tell you how these modifiers play in. What type of government is there? Is it a council? Is it an autocracy? Is it a military government? Is it a dynasty? What type of government is there? Then what type of populations? You can see what is the mix of people there. And then it gives you the base value of what you can create there, what you can buy, up to what level spells are cast in that village. And then I do the NPCs, as well as the economic resources. So I did the NPCs. I put one of those up on the other night on my Twitter, if you guys have seen it. That's Ethne Ron. Ethne Ron is a female Girandi, but she's got an interesting background. She used to be part of an Assyrian military scout group. So I flesh out what is her class. Now they give you some things in here, and they said it is so-and-so class, so-and-so level. Well, I decided, nah, it doesn't fit for a village elder. It's too low of level in my mind. Now, one thing Paizo does, they make village elders somewhere between 3rd to 5th level if it's a small village or small city. If it's a big city and a metropolis, you get up to about 8th or 9th level, which is nice. But to me, that's still not high enough level for what your characters are going to run into. So then I also put some priests. They don't give you any other thing. They just said the people are about 493. It's called the Hidden Village for a certain reason. Here's what its income is. Here's what they do. So I put that under the economics. And then I made out the mix. So many Garandis, so many Kelishites, which the Kelishites as a race, the nice thing is if you got Kadira, Jewel of whatever. I hate this when things pop up. Jewel of the East. The great thing is that Jessica Price, who works for Paizo, did a wonderful job of fleshing it out. So Jessica basically said, here's what's going on. And so I was able to sit down and get everything squared away for it by picking the types of Kelishite. So I picked the Sorehi. And it's, yeah. So they're more of a nomadic people. But it makes sense because they would have been part of this military. So the predominant Kelishites in the region, I give them a flavor. I just don't call them Kelishites. I pick the actual tribes that they're part of, or the cultures that were integrated into the Kelishite Imperium or Entourage. So I'm able to then give them features and background and flesh them out so the players have a little bit a better feeling. I give the basics of the village. There's so many priests. There may be a druid. There may be some shopkeepers. There may be some alchemists or herbalists in the village. So I flesh that out. Why? Because what are our characters going to do when they come into a thing? They're going to look for a place to sell their items or buy items. They're going to look for a place where they have religious worship that they can get divine items, scrolls, potions, other things. Then they also are going to look for places they can get alchemical potions, different types of brews and things. They're going to look for blacksmiths. They're going to look for other things. So include these. Then they're going to look for a watering hole, somewhere they can go and spend the night, drink, eat, socialize, gather information. So these are all areas, whether it's a coffee shop, a bistro, a restaurant, a tavern, an inn, flesh these things out. Pick the cities and flesh them out. I did the same with Ipek. Now, Ipek is a little bit more of a cultural center, so it's got more to it. It's not necessarily a tiny city. It's a bigger, small city. Now, The other one was a small town. This is a small city. Big difference in size by the factor of almost 6 times larger. So it's going to have much more. It's got a rich quarter, a poor quarter, an industrial quarter, a foreigner quarter. So I'm fleshing all that stuff out, plus giving it traits. I went back through, and they already gave me a stat block. Some of it I kept, some of it I modified, because I knew some other things about the area and said, it really could use this. And see, the nice thing is the traits, they give you not just Paizo's PFSRD ones, the SRD20 will also give you third parties. So you can put in some other city traits that are really cool, and that's what I did, knowing the background and reading on the city out of this. Then I did Otet. Why? Otet is a city created by the Pamet dwarves, or the southern dwarves of the desert. They are very much keep the outsiders out of their major populous centers. However, they do like trade goods. They do like bringing things in. So they created Otet so that they could do that. And so their Otet is half Pamet, keep your hands off city. The other half is trade income mixed with the outsiders. So I put in all the different elements that would be there, like the trade consortiums, who the guilds are, who are the bad trade groups trying to get in, who are the good ones, what boons and banes are they going to give. All that information I put on this. That way, when they go to these cities, you have it prepared. And all you have to do is glance over it, and it's easier. Sometimes the hardest things, and tell me if I'm wrong, DMs and GMs, is just coming up and making it out of your butt and trying to make it work. It doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. And you're going to forget, and you're going to go, God, what was that last thing I said? And then you have to jot notes and hope you don't lose the notes. And then you got to recreate it when the characters come back and do the same thing over and over again. Well, even the best of GMs, like Matt Mercer or the Rollistas or Basement Heroes or Steel Empire. All these guys, even though they make up an improv some, they've got some written notes because you have to. In order to keep cohesiveness of the story, you have to keep some sort of note system of what's going on. Even Will Wheaton did it for his Titan's Grave. You got to do that kind of stuff. And he has a notebook, and the nice thing, you can go to plot lines and stories and other things. That's the kind of stuff you want to do, and that's why I use these cheat sheets, because, okay, it gives me the role modifiers. So, say the guys want to go commit a crime, a criminal thing. Well, they're going to get -2 on their rolls in a lawful neutral city. Why? Because they cut crime down. However, or actually, in this case, maybe up. The corruption might be down or up, depending. Doing something that has to do with the law and order of the city, you get good modifiers or bad. If you want to discover lore in that city, special things or things you're trying to figure out about the area, you get modifiers. So these help you to give the modifiers for your players as they're digging in on whether it's harder or easier to do. An insular city is going to be much harder to gather information and get any type of help, where an outgoing metropolis, very easy, because you're dealing with different elements and different groups. I put in any guilds, so if there's thieves guilds there, if there's other types of guilds, even the bartenders and barkeeps, I give classes to and alignments and sex and orientation of what background and ethnicity they are. Why? Because, for instance, a Osiriani Girundi talking with a Kelishite tribesperson of the Kelishite Interajum, there's this. Because the Kelishites came in and set up Osirian as a satrapy for a while. They made it part of their empire. Ooh, big no-no. So now there's this going on between the two races. Because they see the Kelishites as the aggressor. Not all of them. There were some that were friendly. So kind of like, think about Ireland. Ireland has people that are pro-England. They have people that are very anti-England and see England as the aggressor and as the hated invader. those interactions will go depending on racial backgrounds and everything else. So you're building a real story here with some continuity. Then I go through, and for instance, let's say I came up with some groups in the beginning, because in the beginning the party is competing with some other groups. So I went to my lovely Hero Lab, and I came up with the different ones. So in this case, it's Falto Minori. He is part of a group. Now, what did I do? I gave him some personal things. I gave him a picture. I gave him stats. And I gave him classes. So let's look at the classes here. So here's Falto's classes. So then it gives me skills and feats and everything else. So when the party runs into him, and if he's competing with them, there's one of two ways it goes. Let's help each other and scratch each other's back, or I'm prepared both ways. And so really fleshing out your NPCs is important, writing them up. Why do I use Hero Lab? Hero Lab is very easy to get around. I can do tons of NPCs there much faster than pencil and paper. Even though I love pencil and paper, it's monotonous to have to write and write and write, and you get writer's cramp. Right. So utilize systems that are there. Utilize automation. If you don't have Hero Lab, pick a stat sheet that you can easily automate. They have Excel stat sheets for different systems. The nice things about Hero Lab is it's available for Savage Worlds, Mutants and Masterminds. It's available for Shadowrun and for D&D 5, 4, and 3.5. It's also available for Pathfinder. So you've got a lot of systems. Vampire the Requiem, White Wolf Games. There's a lot of different systems that these guys were smart enough to latch onto and incorporate the data. And so it's easy for you as a GM to then use those for your systems. The nice thing is if you want to use, for instance, a Midgard campaign out of Kobold Press, they have Midgard in here. So you can put all the Midgard stats, books, and everything else from Kobold Press in there for either D&D or for Pathfinder. So really cool in the fact that it will work with you that way. So those are two things I do. The third thing I do is I look at the plot story and the main characters, and I try to put them into Hero Lab as well. Why is that? Because then I can have my computer screen with the encounters up, and I can keep track real easily of the effects, click effects, have things go up. It calculates whether spells conflict each other, whether effects work together for armor class or not, or for spell resistance, or for whatever else. So I'm not having to remember 1,001 rules as a GM. And so that makes it easier, especially in gameplay, because then I can click on whatever spells they put on themselves, how it affects them, and then it tabulates that. So I know if they have more hit points, better armor class, better strength, stats scores, reduced stat scores. So for instance, if the players throw a spell on them, I can click that as a hindrance, and it does that. If I get a critical hit, it has adjustments that allow me to adjust for ability score things, conditions, and everything else. People say, is Hero Lab worth it? Oh, heck yes. When I'm running a game, very much so. Especially if I got multiple combatants up or multiple NPCs on both sides. It's real helpful. So keep that in mind. Now, what else do? I also put out maps of cities and other things. So you're going to see me create maps of cities, maps of buildings, getting the different type of erase maps. Those are important to do, especially when you modify things. Now, the other thing that I do is put in some history of the area. So write in history. You need to have history, especially current history, on how things are going, how things are affected. And if you change the storyline, make sure you make notes clear to yourself to do that, because you want to be able to justify. So, for instance, if you add the Aspis Consortium into the module, you've got to write them into the whole story and how do they develop in there, and how do they rival any other groups. Take into account your player's backstory. So I got a player who hates the Aspis Consortium and is kind of a terrorist to them. He's a terrorizer of the Aspis. So I'm putting in how the two are going to go at each other and what kind of things are going to go on. That way, when the situation occurs, I'm prepared to take the story whatever way I need to take it. So again, this is about probably 26 minutes of a video. I know it's a little longer for me, but I really want to take into what I do and how I modify and what I do for things. Now, with the story rights, the other thing I would say is put in different story goals and hooks and XP. You want to put in, especially for verbal combat, social combats, maligning an organization, other types of things. You want to have different fame, fortune, boons that you give the players if they do these type of things. And then you got to do some encounter tables. So I suggest they give you encounter tables for the region, but it's not up to date. So I take all my books, look at the CR levels, and put in the encounters and build the encounter tables for the different regions. So that way it's real easy, along with the book, where you get it from and what the CR rating, the challenge rating is. So you know if it's appropriate for your party's level or not. And if not, then you go and pick a different one that you don't want to kill off your party. That's not your goal as a GM. So often we use the book encounter tables. Those are nice, but they don't put in the flair that you want to put into that region. So thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. This is how to modify an existing adventure path to your own goals. I could go on and on. So if you've got other questions, ask away. Rick M. the GM at Twitter, and then RICMOH45 at Gmail. Thanks, guys.